Hey there everybody, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I am going to share with you a new basing technique that I kind of just stumbled upon, and this is probably going to be the way that I am going to base any of my larger based models going forward. It looks absolutely fantastic, and it's super easy, no paint required. So one of the biggest problems that I personally have, and I feel like many miniature wargamers out there kind of share this sentiment, bases are typically the last thing that you do when you're working on a miniature, especially like a large army project. And it can be a little draining kind of working through dozens of miniatures when you've spent hours upon hours painting everything, and the models themselves look good, and just finding that little bit of extra motivation to get all of the bases finished off can be really, really challenging. Now, in the past, I'll throw some pictures on the screen. I have showed you guys, if you put some grit down and then some weathering powder over top of them, that's a really quick way to get your miniature basing done. And then I've also showed you guys the base ready mixes from Geek Gaming Scenics, which are a phenomenal way to get your bases done really, really quickly. Now, this technique that I'm going to share with you today is what happens when you put both of those two together. So one of the things that I've kind of noticed with the base ready mixes is on a larger based miniature, even though there's grit and fine texture mixed into the mix, and I'll open this up so you guys can see, it can look a little flat. And what we get when we combine these two products is that exact effect. So I've been working on the Sorcerer Kings for Conquest. If you've been following some of the more recent videos, you've seen some of those miniatures that I've painted. And when I got to the Djinn models, these air elementals, I ran into an issue where, since they're wind spirits and their lower body is sort of this like cyclone, magical effect, I needed the model to look like it was blended into the ground. And that was achieved by laying down a layer of this earth texture. So we're going to go ahead and get started and do that now with this test model. So to scoop the texture out of the jar, I'm just going to go ahead and use an old popsicle stick. And then I've got a nice big synthetic brush that's a little ratty. I don't necessarily care if it gets messed up, to help spread it around. Now, these models are near completion, but they're not quite finished. There's a few details that we will need to complete once we're done getting the basing. So we're close to the end of the painting process. And now, since we've got a little bit of that texture out, you can wet your brush, and when you add a little moisture to this, it's a lot easier to spread. So we can just kind of unevenly push this closer to the miniature, and we want it to butt up against. And applying the paste in this way, it also creates that uneven texture. We don't want this to really be smoothed out. You want some nice crest and some peaks. So we're just going to go ahead and keep repeating this process until we've got all of the base covered with this texture. And this is very quick and easy. As you can see, in just a few seconds, already got half the base done. So here we are with that base texture completely applied. And as you can see, we went ahead and we let it run into the swirly cyclone effect on the bottom of the miniature, and we've got some nice texture, we've got some peaks and some crest, and we've kind of built up our base of that broken up ground. So now we have to let this dry. These products typically will take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour to fully dry. So it helps if you're going to use this technique to work in batches, very large batches actually. So by the time you've gone ahead and applied all of your base texture, when you go back to the first miniature, it'll already be dry and ready for you to carry on with the next step. All right, so our texture on the base is now dry. So we're ready to go ahead and apply the base ready mix to the base. And now this is going to work very similar to, every other time I've shown you guys how to use the base ready mix. So I've got the fast drying basing glue from Geek Gaming Scenics. Now, if you don't have this special glue, you can just use PVA glue. That's totally fine. But again, you want to get a nice big brush that you don't really care about. And we're just going to slather this all over the base like so. And you're going to want to apply this fairly thickly. And you also want to run some along the, the bottom section of the miniature here. And that'll help tie the miniature into the basing sort of diorama that we're building up. And then because our lady here is a wind elemental and she's disturbing the ground, I'm actually going to put some of this on the miniature itself so that we can adhere some of the basing material to the bottom of the miniature, and it'll really help sell that effect that she's disturbing the ground as she's charging into battle. And with that basing glue applied, now we're going to take our base ready mix and just dump this onto all of the spots where we applied that basing glue. And now this is a little messy, so you might want to, lay down some parchment paper or a paper towel or something so that you don't waste the mix. It makes it easy to dump it back into your container when you're done. But you just want to make sure you get everything nice and covered. And then once that's kind of settled, you can give it a nice little gentle tap to remove the excess and kind of clean up your base rim a little bit. And then we're going to set that aside and let that basing glue get a grip on it for just a couple of minutes. All right, so next we're going to seal in the base ready mix, and for that we're going to use this matte scenic sealant. Again, if you don't have this, you could just thin down some PVA glue, and that will work just fine. Now, this comes in a spritzer bottle, but we're not going to use the spritzer cap for this. I'm just going to use a pipette to control how much of this I'm actually using. And now one thing I do want to kind of point out, and I'll demonstrate here, is that when you put this on your base ready mix, you'll see here, oh, well, that actually dispersed kind of nicely. Sometimes it will bead up on you. And if it does, you could just spritz it with a little bit of IPA, the rubbing alcohol, not the beer, and that will break up the surface tension. But since this actually worked fairly nicely without me having to spritz, we'll just carry on. You want to make sure that, if you carried your basing onto your miniature, that you go ahead and hit those spots as well. But you want to get this fairly well soaked. And I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but you can kind of see how it's glistening on the right side. And that's about the kind of coverage that you're going to want to hit. And it does help having this on a painting handle, because this will kind of drip and run off of the side of your base. And now while that's still wet, because I'm doing a forest base, I've got these little miniature leaves. I found them on Amazon, and I'll put a link down in the video description if anyone's interested. But I took a few colors and mixed them up in a little container, and they have a very nice sort of like fall kind of look when you mix the colors together. So while this is still wet, we're just going to sprinkle some of these around on the base, as well as onto some of those areas of the mini that have glue on them. And with that, a little bit will go a long way. Now, while my bases are still a little damp, since I'm doing sort of a forest theme, I've also got the Green Stuff World Spring Leaf Litter and Natural Leaf Litter, which are just some different colors in a slightly different shape from what we had just used previously. And since our base is already a little damp, we can go ahead and use some tweezers to apply these, and then just push them down into our existing base texture. And so now that all of those leaves are on the base, we're just going to add just a little bit more PVA, kind of focused on the area where we added those leaves, just to really make sure that those adhere well where we had them placed. All right, and once you're done and that PVA glue is dried, here is your finished result. Now, I did paint the base rim. With Conquest, you could actually probably get away with that, because in Last Argument of Kings, your bases actually sit down in a movement tray, so nobody's going to really see your base rim. I'm just in the habit of doing so. And for that, I always use surface primer. It's just a little bit harder wearing than your average hobby paint. But as you can see, we've got some really nice uneven ground texture on the bases. Lots of color. We've got, rocks, and everything looks natural. And we didn't have to use any paint. Now, if you are interested in the beautiful minis that I used in this video, again, they are the Djinn models from the Sorcerer Kings faction of Conquest, both Last Argument of Kings and First Blood, their skirmish variant. We are sponsored by Para-Bellum Games, so if you would like to pick up some Conquest miniatures at a discount, make sure you use our code JTS Wargaming when you check out on their web store. That'll save you 10% off of your purchase. It's a great way to support the channel and also get yourself some really awesome miniatures. That's really all I've got for today. I hope everyone found this useful. Leave me some comments down below if you've ever tried something similar to this with your basing, or if you're a new convert and you're gonna start doing your bases this way. Let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you all in the next video.